Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Bree Hogan. I am the sales manager at Powell City of Books. Today we are happy to welcome Timothy Zahn in conversation with Tom Hoeler. Before we begin, I have a few housekeeping notes for tonight's event. This event is a discussion between Timothy and Tom, followed by a Q&A. If you have a question for Timothy or Tom, please submit it using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We do ask that you put the questions in the Q&A box rather than in the chat. You can support Timothy and Powell's by purchasing a copy of Chaos Rising at powells.com. I've posted a link to the book in the chat function, so you can click on the chat button to find that link. This evening's event is being recorded and will be posted on Powell's YouTube channel in a few days. And you can always follow us at powells.com or on social media for more information about all of our virtual events. Today, we just announced an upcoming event with Ali Broche, the author of Hyperbole and a Half. Her new book is called Solutions and Other Problems, and that event is scheduled for September 26th. You can take a look at powells.com for more information. But tonight, we're very excited to welcome Timothy Zahn to talk about his new book, Chaos Rising, which is book number 1 of the Star Wars Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy. Discover Thrawn's origins with the Chiss Ascendancy in the first book in this epic new Star Wars trilogy. Beyond the edge of the galaxy lies the unknown regions, chaotic, uncharted, and near impassable, with hidden secrets and dangers in equal measure. And nestled in its swirling chaos is the Ascendancy, home to the enigmatic Chiss and the 9 ruling families that lead them. The peace of the Ascendancy, a beacon of calm and stability, is shattered after a daring attack on the Chiss capital that leaves no trace of the enemy. Baffled, the Ascendancy dispatches one of its brightest young military officers to root out the unseen assailants, a recruit born of no title, but adopted into the powerful family of the Mitth and given the name Thrawn. With the might of the Expansionary Fleet at his back and the aid of his comrade, answers begin to fall into place. But as Thrawn's first command probes deeper into the vast stretch of space his people call the chaos, he realizes that the mission he has been given is not what it seems. Timothy Zahn is the author of more than 60 novels, nearly 90 short stories and novelettes, and 4 short fiction collections. In 1984, he won the Hugo Award for Best Novella. Zahn is best known for his Star Wars novels, Thrawn, Thrawn Alliances, Thrawn Treason, Heir to the Empire, Dark Force Rising, The Last Command, Spectre of the Past, Vision of the Future, Survivor's Quest, Outbound Flight, Alliance, Choices of One, and The Scoundrels. That's quite a list. With more than 8 million copies of his books in print. Other books include StarCraft Evolution, the Cobra series, the Quadrille series, and the young adult Dragonback series. Zahn has a BS in physics from Michigan State University and an MS from the University of Illinois. He lives with his family on the Oregon coast. Tonight, Timothy is joined in conversation by his editor at Rey Books, Tom Hoeler. Tom works with Timothy to craft new stories in a galaxy far, far away. Thank you to both Timothy and Tom for joining us this evening.
Thanks for having us. I think that just about covers it, doesn't it, Tom?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, yeah, that was it. Everyone knows about the book. Everyone knows about you. Everyone knows.
There we
go. There we go. How are you doing, Tim?
Good.
Good.
How about you?
Yeah, doing good, doing good. It's nice to speak with you. It's nice to, though we can't see all of you, it's nice to have so many people joining us here today virtually, and we hope that everyone's doing well.
Yeah, I prefer if I'm going to do social interactions, actually do them, but this is a pretty good second choice.
Yeah, it's not a bad way to spend a Friday.
Yeah.
So before we get started, and we are going to talk about all sorts of stuff related to Chaos Rising, I just wanted to set some expectations for everyone watching, listening, and viewing. We are going to talk about the book, but we are going to manage sort of spoilers for the book in this way. Anything that was sort of publicly released around the time the book was coming out or just before. So excerpts, the character list, the Dramatis personae from the book, Some of those early story beats we are absolutely going to talk about in specificity, but we are absolutely not going to spoil the complete totality of the book, everything that happens. We are going to talk about character arcs and themes and things like that, but we're not going to turn to page 200 and say, oh my gosh, look at this. So if you haven't finished the book, if you haven't started the book, absolutely no worries. And we're so glad that you decided to join us. So that's where all that sits, in case anyone had any worries there.
There isn't a single gotcha moment that defines the whole book, as there are in some of my books. So don't worry about it. We're not gonna do anything like that.
So you'll be all set. So with that being said, let's just sort of dive in and start. And the first thing that I wanted to ask you about was, as Bree, listed all of the Star Wars books and Star Wars stories that you've written over the years, the Ascendancy and the Chiss home and in the chaos has kind of been at the margins, has kind of come in and out in certain of your stories. Certainly we saw some of it in Treason with, Ar'alani and Eli returning to Thrawn, but it's kind of always been a bit at the margins. But now with this, not just single book, a whole trilogy, we're just diving headfirst into it. So can you start by sharing some of the process you had for actually building out the world of the Ascendancy now that you're actually there and telling stories there?
Well, when I was offered these books, and this was a key thing that Tom and the other Del Rey editors talked to Lucasfilm and decided, this would be a good series to do once I finished Thrawn Treason. And so I knew about it when I was offered the books. So it was given to me as a package, first time since the original Thrawn trilogy that I was given 3 books at once. So I do get to do long-term story arcs, character arcs among the 3 books without having to wonder if I'm going to get to finish this character arc. So yeah, I've got some plans to do all sorts of characters, all sorts of story arcs, and in and amongst them, I will be building up the Chiss Ascendancy. As Tom mentioned back, various books and stories I've put in, think of it as I've put the 4 corners of the house in. I've got the 9 ruling families. I've got the fact that Thrawn was adopted into one of them, a little bit about merit adoptives, blood, cousins, etc. Mentioned some of the people in the Ascendancy, mentioned the syndics and the syndicure and all. So I had the 4 posts of the house. Now I'm getting to kind of fill that in, put in the walls, put in the interior, put in the decoration, the decor and everything. And it's been a lot of fun because what I'd set myself up with was a system unlike anything that I'm familiar with on Earth. We don't have a president and a bicameral legislature and judiciary or the combinations other nations use. This is all run by the syndicure, which is run by the 9 ruling families, with assistance from the 40 great families, and then a whole bunch of lesser families that no one will ever have heard of. Very much like most cultures in the world, there are a lot of small families and such that live their lives, come and go, and never impact the greater political sort of thing, but you never know what something will happen like that. I was also told when I started this that the various things other people had done with the Ascendancy, some things had popped up in the games and other stories that I thought were, that doesn't really fit what I was envisioning. Pablo Hidalgo told me, that's all legends. You can ignore all of that. Just go for it. So that's what I've been doing. I've been putting in, you don't want to drop in 5 pages of exposition, obviously. So it's woven in and out of the story. But first you see a lot of the basics in Chaos Rising. Second book will delve more deeply into that, and you'll get to see a lot more of the interactions between the families, some of the tensions between them, how the military people see I've sworn an oath to the military and to the Ascendancy, but I'm also part of this family. Where do my loyalties in the crux, where do they land if there's a conflict? So, and we'll be doing that and then extending that further into the 3rd book as we wrap up the story. Hopefully we'll get a lot more of the detail, and I'll finish off the living room and put a good rug in.
That sounds pretty good to me. So, just send that all over when it's done. I'm ready to see it.
I'm writing as fast as I can, Tom. You know that.
I know. And to actually be quite honest, everyone, we're well into working on book 2 and talking about book 3, and all the things that Tim has just said are working their way into the next couple volumes. So as part of building out the world building and really kind of figuring out the rest of the house, was there any part of the Ascendancy or building out some of the world or maybe some of the details about the connections between things, was there any part of it that was particularly challenging or difficult, or they're like, wow, now that I'm really thinking about this took longer for you to flush out than maybe you imagined it was, versus other parts which came more smoothly? Or did it all just fall into place?
I mean, most of it has flown fairly easily. When you're working on this kind of project, I mean, I invented the Ascendancy a couple of decades ago, and my subconscious has been working on that pretty much ever since, well, when I brought Ar'alani and Eli back in Treason, I had to develop some of that Chiss, the technology, some of the weaponry and defenses that I'm using now in the Ascendancy trilogy. So I've been working on it in the back of my mind for a long time. And as I get to a particular spot, often the answer is right there. Sometimes it takes a little while. There's a scene where one of the families needs a new patriarch. And okay, how do you get a new patriarch? And I came up with an answer that seemed quite reasonable. You saw it, Tom. Did it seem reasonable to you?
Seemed perfectly reasonable.
So again, nothing I would have thought of ahead of time, but now I've got this question. How do I answer it? Okay, there's the answer. So a lot of the work is done before I actually get to that spot, courtesy of just the subconscious mind that's been trained over the last 40 years to write stories and build worlds.
Sounds good. Well, then, sort of kind of the writing done before it gets started, or when you sit down to write, one of the things that we spend a lot of time sort of figuring out is like, where do we start this thing? Like, where does not just this book start, but the first chapter, or because we'll get to memories in a second, but there's more than just chapters in this book.
Right.
The first pages of this book are not just the first pages of this book; they're the first pages of this world and this trilogy and this place beyond the known galaxy. So we end up starting with this big surprise attack. And this was something that we talked about a lot. We went back and forth. The original draft didn't start there. Did the original draft start, I think, with him out on a mission already? Or
the original draft, yes. Him about a chapter in, or half a chapter in.
So eventually, though, we came around to starting here. And what about starting with the surprise attack ended up making the most sense about rooting us here to start the book versus anywhere else?
Well, let me back up one step. The idea of starting with attack was your idea. You're the one who suggested this. This just demonstrates the interaction between a writer and a good editor, that I will think certain things, he will look at it, or he or she will look at it from a different point of view, a different idea, throw suggestions out to me. Okay, I don't want anything huge and whatever, but yes, a battle here, I can tie that into the rest of the book. So the more good eyes, more good brains you have working on a book, the better it comes out. I've been very fortunate over the years to have good editors, both at Del Rey, Bantam before them, Lucasfilm, and the story group adds even more depth to it. So this is a solitary profession, but we don't do it entirely alone, and that's a good thing. So anyway, you'd suggested hitting off a little more of a bang. It made sense. I was able to weave a little more of the politics right into the beginning of it. Then we picked up where I had originally started and went on from there.
Sounds good. And I just want everyone to know, I didn't ask that question because I wanted him to paint it, but I will take it. That's very kind of you.
Well, I told him to make sure he did ask it, because I wanted to bring out the whole
That's nice.
Collaboration aspect of this job.
That is very kind. Thank you. And then speaking of beginnings, something else that we talked about was not just where do we start this book, but and I believe our first conversation about this was at Star Wars Celebration in Chicago, having breakfast.
Yes.
Which I still have the small little note from. And we were just doing it, hiding in plain sight.
You posted it too, as I
did.
recall.
I did. And it was a question of like, when should this trilogy take place? And not to people who are reading the book and be like, oh yeah, when exactly is this going on? I promise you, by the end of this first book, you're going to run into something that's going to make it abundantly clear where. And if you look at the timeline at the beginning of the book, it kind of tells you. So what informed when you made the decision of, well, this is where I would like the trilogy to be anchored? What informed that decision?
Yeah, the one definitive thing I was given from Lucasfilm, and I agreed with it, was this trilogy would not go past the opening scenes of the book Thrawn, where he is brought into the Empire. So that defined the end point of the trilogy. So I backed up. I didn't want it to extend too long. The story I had in mind is not one that'll be leisurely done over 20 years. It's going to be 3, 4, 5 years, maybe at the most. So backing up from that point put me where I started. But I also wanted to do some of Thrawn's earlier life and earlier military and other sorts of complications and such. Do we want to go into memories now then, or is that a segue?
We will get to those. Yeah, we will get to memories in a little bit.
Stand by.
Yes, because those were those were a lot of fun to do, and I think that helped get to being able to tell an even wider story while also making sure we had a very strong anchor to like a central plot that we would follow. And have these flashes. So turn away from things like, why did we start the trilogy here? Why did we start the book here? A question and I believe I'd been asking you this question going back through a few of the previous Thrawn books, was how different is Thrawn from his own people? Like how different, how unique is Thrawn among the Chiss? We certainly know how unique Thrawn is among Imperials, not just because he isn't, human as most Imperials are, but just because of the way he thinks and acts.
Yeah.
And we find, and you'll find in this book, and you'll find from the early excerpts, that he stands out even amongst his own people. Yes. And so both in the stories we see him, within the Empire and the Lesser Galaxy, as the Chiss like to call the galaxy far, far away, and within the Ascendancy, he's kind of got this consistent sense of othering going on. He's kind of he's always out of place there.
He's an outsider in some level everywhere. Yeah.
Right. So how does that kind of affect him, and how does that affect the way he views probably his own identity? Because he never seems to have, all his grounding seems to have to come only from within. It's almost never from without.
I mean, he is not a loner per se, but he is one that he can only talk to only certain people will understand him. And you get at least one per book. You had Pelion in the original trilogy. You've got Eli Vanto and some other fellow officers in the first three, the Imperial trilogy. You'll have Ar'alani and some of the others in this one, but it's a limited group. They're the ones who understand him, or if they don't entirely understand him, are comfortable with him. Okay, I don't understand how he does this, but I trust him that he does it right. But it leads to all sorts of other things. If you don't understand something, sometimes it worries you or frightens you. And so Thrawn will have to put up with a lot of misunderstanding as well. And it's just something he has to work through, but he's continually having to prove himself. And I think this is something that resonates with an awful lot of us. I always have to prove myself. And I've got a small circle of friends, but a lot of people just don't seem to understand me. So it's in that way, despite the fact he's a Chiss, he's quite relatable.
Yeah, that was a really good answer. I got caught for a second thinking about it. I was like, yeah, this is totally right. But actually that segues nicely into one of the big themes that readers are going to see in this book, and it certainly, we're building on it, it's carrying into the other books, is this idea of identity within the Chiss Ascendancy. We see it, as you mentioned, with Thrawn. We see it with someone like Ar'alani, who, used to have a family affiliation, but because of her progression and rise through the ranks, no longer has that. We see it with Thalius and the Skywalkers, who have one identity and then are forced to sort of transition to something else. We even see a little bit the way identity is going to play for a character like Quilori, the Pathfinder, who people may not have met yet, but certainly will spend some time with. And what I wanted to ask about specific to the Ascendancy is, what role do you think that individualism plays in the Ascendancy? Because if you look at the stories that you've written, particularly ones set very much in imperial structure, individuality in the imperial space and in the Empire is treated in a number of different ways. But in the Ascendancy, because it's such a different place and has such a different socio-political structure, how does individualism work? And is it actually valued in the Ascendancy?
You always have the dynamic and the tension between doing things the way somebody wants you to do them. If you're in a military or in a corporation or even in a family, you've got certain things you're supposed to do. And to some extent, you can be frowned upon for veering away from that. On the other hand, it's the people who move away from that structure, don't completely fall into that pattern, that are the ones that are the innovators, the ones that change people's minds, the ones that do something and the rest of the corporation or the family says, that may be a better way of doing things. So there's always that tension, and there is some of that as well in the Ascendancy. You're going to have people who just want to be told what to do. This is how we've always done things. There are other people who will, well, let's try it this way, or I'm seeing 8 moves ahead and 3 of these moves can be skipped as I'm going around the protocol or whatever. And again, different people are going to see this in different ways. Thrawn will have people who are very much on his side because they have seen what he does, they've seen how he accomplishes things, and are willing to run interference for him. And others who think of him as, this is a loose cannon who's going to take down the whole ship if we don't put a lasso around him. So we're going to have that. Again, that's something we all face, is the battle between doing things the way we're expected to in order to keep a well-oiled machine running, and doing something different that may or may not pan out, but may pay really good dividends down the line. You see, this is just all about us. The Chiss are really just us.
Are they? I have to invest in some blue paint, and also one of those fancy uniforms. Right now, I just have Star Wars T-shirts.
Yeah, there we go.
I get the feeling there's not a lot of T-shirt wearing going on in the Chiss Ascendancy.
I don't see them wearing a lot of T-shirts, but most of the time I'm spending in the military, and dressing down has certain limits in the military. I'm not seeing khaki shorts either, but we're probably not doing the tropics.
Yeah. So one of the ingredients to a really good Thrawn story, and there's a couple of these things that throughout this conversation I want to hit, and this is a good place to insert one of them. One of the ingredients to a good one is we need to have compelling and viable villains for Thrawn to face, antagonists, challenges for him to overcome. And in Chaos Rising, we're going to meet 2 of them. And like I said, these people are listed in the front of your book in the Dramatis persona. So we're not going to, their existence is not a spoiler. First, tell me a little bit about this guy named Yiv the Benevolent, if only because he's got a pretty stellar title. What about him makes him dangerous, potentially a really worthy threat? What is the why should we be worried about him?
He, in some ways, is a little like Palpatine Jr. He doesn't have the Force, but he is a master of manipulating people. He's very good at the whole carrot and stick approach. Our group will, Nicodune, Destiny, can make your planet prosperous. We can help you against your enemies, or we could come and slap you down silly. So he does a lot of these. It's very personable. He does a lot of this. it can be almost a cult of personality type of thing. But he is getting systems on his side, willingly or otherwise, and slowly building an empire, which he is trying to build around the edges of the ascendancy. Thrawn sees this, Thrawn recognizes it, most other Chiss don't. So the danger is not just he's a good military commander and good political manipulator, but he's also a bit more subtle than some of the enemies they have run up against in the past. He's not going to just jump in the middle and kick out in all directions. He's going to plan things a little more carefully.
Speaking of subtle, another individual who sort of, let's say, arises as maybe a threat, maybe a rival, maybe something else, we'll obviously have to see how the stories unfold, is actually someone within Thrawn's own family.
Yeah.
A character, Thurfian, who you'll meet and who you'll see actually connects all the way back to Thrawn joining the Mitth family.
Yeah.
What, perhaps the same or separate from Yiv, what does Thurfian represent to Thrawn that is threatening, and what does Thrawn represent to Thurfian that makes him, that makes Thurfian say, this is a person, even within my own family, who I am at the very least at odds with or am suspicious of?
Thurfian is very much a family man. His whole life is dedicated to the family, to bringing the family more honor and glory, power, defending against rival families, etc. To him, Thrawn is the $1 million bet on the roulette wheel. He sees the family as putting, Thrawn is if he hits the proper roulette number, he will bring great honor and glory to the family. If he doesn't, if and when he misses, and Thurfian is convinced at some point he will fail, he could bring down the family in a way that no individual has done probably for generations. So he recognizes that Thrawn is a big asset or big liability, but as the more conservative, more family-oriented, he would prefer to ignore the asset and just make sure the liability isn't there. And because he is high up in the family, he's got potential assets, things he can do against Thrawn, which he has to be careful with because other people in the family strongly support Thrawn. So again, we're showing the balance of power, of authority, how all of this mixes together in the book.
And you pointed out something that makes him even more interesting is that his talents and the things he's good at are the things that we know that Thrawn is not always as focused on, which is the kind of more political realm and the dynamics and relationships between people. Which makes it kind of all the more interesting that Thrawn comes from a society that's built around familial connections and structure, and the corridors of power are just intrinsically linked with the kind of networks and relationships between people, which is obviously much different than the Empire, which is this very top-down power from the top. And it's very structured, which kind of makes the Ascendancy almost a more dangerous place for Thrawn to be if he doesn't have the right people on his side than the Empire ever was, even though he was the ultimate outsider in the Empire.
Yeah, very much. He is good really at one thing, and that is military actions, military preparations, battles, defenses, all of that stuff. In the political realm, he is completely lost. And as you say, without support of people who do understand the politics and can work them, he would have been out a long time ago. So where you've got some people wanting him not to be a liability and willing to sacrifice the asset, you've got some who are seeing it exactly the opposite, that he is, for better or worse, he is going to make a huge splash, a huge effect on the Ascendancy, and we've got to follow this through. But yeah, he is not good at politics at all.
And his, the potential for failure because the family structure, you're impacting more than just yourself.
Yeah.
And so speaking of families, in the Ascendancy, we have the 9 ruling families, which obviously includes the Mitth, or the family.
At the moment, remember that number can change.
Yes, at the moment, that is a potentially changing number. We'll see.
Yeah.
And then you have the 40 great families and all the other innumerable ones. Can you give people a little bit more of a sense of like just what that means for a Chiss to be brought into one of the higher families from either one of the 40, or as Thrawn is basically from a completely unknown family? Like what are the real substantive kind of opportunities that kind of shift makes for a Chiss like Thrawn, or any Chiss really?
Well, you suddenly now have the family's resources behind you. You've got all of their political connections, their assets, their people. The first thing that happens to Thrawn as he's brought into the Mitth family is that he gets to go to the academy, which is going to prove to be the thing he's really good at. He will have people from the family guiding him, paying for schooling, all of the assets. I don't know, in the old days, maybe it would be like being adopted into the Kennedy family or something like that. But you've got all of these assets, all of these people noticing you, and people who trade favors around you or with you. Oh, okay, well, I'll let him be promoted to this rank if you help promote this person from our family to another rank. I mean, that's not supposed to happen, but everybody knows that the politics does impinge on the military more than the military would like. So he still has to prove himself. He is not brought in as the son of JFK or something like that. He is a merit adoptive, which means he's kind of on probation. But it makes a huge difference in the political realm and what he gets to do. Again, he kind of glides straight through that without really noticing it. His focus is going to be the military because that's what he's good at, and that's where he's going to wind up making the difference.
Just to note for the readers, so as Tim had mentioned, in books 2 and 3, we're obviously going to continue to delve into the families, their relationships and rivalries, the structure of family in the Ascendancy. And there is a character who is going to be introduced in book 2 that you will spend a lot of time with. I'm not going to say her name, but I'm so enjoying already her journey, and particularly her journey and what we see reflected in the family structure and the way that family impacts your career and your life in the Ascendancy. Really good. You're really gonna like it. You're really gonna like it. So this is something that I had written down.
That was a paid political pitch for book 2.
That was coming soon. This is a question that I had written down for you, but there's a number of readers who submitted this question both before this event and even now. I apologize. I was searching through trying to make sure I could attribute it, but if you submit this question, great job. Which is that one of the things that we always get from Thrawn books, again, we talked about villains, we talked about a few things. Another thing we always get is these really compelling ship battles and space tactics.
Yeah.
Can you talk a bit about your approach to designing ship battles? So how you create just compelling ship battles that have clarity, which is kind of the most impressive thing that I often find, because you're describing a space battle in a place that doesn't exist using things that are hard to just, if you just are trying to describe to me what some ships in Star Wars look like, let alone those ships moving and doing anything.
Yeah.
But then not just that, but was there any added challenge now that you're doing it using ships that aren't like Star Destroyers and X-Wings and TIE Defenders that, again, a lot of both yourself and the people who are reading the books have at least the physical familiarities of?
Yeah, I built a lot of the basics of the military technology in Treason with Ar'alani. We've got the electrostatic barriers, we've got plasma spheres, spectrum lasers, one or two other things, the breacher missiles. And so all of my tactics are now around these rather than, as you said, the Imperial Star Destroyers, TIE fighter and X-Wing battles and such. So I'm constrained a little bit by, here's the technology these guys have. And then it's a matter of, okay, here is what I need to happen to come out of this battle. I need this side to win, or this side to win with a certain amount of damage or whatever. And I just set up the opposing forces, and then I play chess with myself. Okay, here is Thrawn's force. They're going to go in and do this. The other side will react by hitting the camera like that. The other side will react this way. Okay, what is Thrawn's counter going to be? It's basically the same thing I've always done with space battles, of envisioning both sides, making both sides clever, leaning a little bit on the tactics because I know what outcome I want from it, and then just visualizing it and making sure that visualization gets across to the readers so you can follow what's happening. Too often in science fiction movies and everything else, you get the battles going on, you really can't follow what's happening. The advantage of doing this in novel form rather than movies, I've got a lot more time to be able to do that sort of thing. But yeah, the key is to make the battle realistic, make both sides clever, and make sure the reader can see how it all is coming out.
Makes sense. And again, to tease something in book 2, there are some really cool space battles and tactical things. Like, it's not a spoiler to tell you that in book 2 there are going to be more space battles and tactics in the Thrawn book, I think. But there are more of them, and I have to say that they are pretty darn inventive. And they definitely do not resemble space battles that we have seen or read in Star Wars before. And there's a lot of cool things, some fun things that I tried to guess what was coming, there wasn't. So again, if you really like the space battles and tactics, you're going to get more of that, and you're going to get some really cool things coming in book 2.
And that's one of the other things. There's a device, a weapon I invented early on in book 2, which we won't mention because spoilers. But okay, once we've got this weapon, now what else can I do with it? What else will the owners of this weapon do with it? And that progressed down the line. So I was able to do 1 or 2 other things with that later on. But that's one of the things you find out after being an author for this long a time is you will find your subconscious as ahead of you. I will put a throwaway line in chapter 3, and in chapter 8, oh, that wasn't a throwaway line. That leads into this, which I'd not expected when I did the throwaway line. Same for weapons and tactics. Okay, this group does this kind of thing. Okay, that was cool for this one. Oh, but wait a minute, I can use that later on. And so I've got the outline crafted, but all these little details then start filling in and building on each other and on themselves. And it's really kind of exciting to watch it come together, because a lot of the times I'm watching it as much as you guys are. Oh, okay, that was cool. And that would lead to this. Oh, that's neat. And I'll put that in the book.
Good. I mean, I'm glad it works out that way, and it does. They come together quite well, and they end up being not just fun puzzles for you to watch other characters solve, but also fun puzzles that sometimes you can guess on the way too, though sometimes you can't. Which again, book 2 has a nice balance of those things.
Ideally, any of these puzzle things, the reader will get no more than a paragraph before the characters get it. You don't want the readers to get it too quickly. On the other hand, you don't want to obscure it so much they feel like they've been cheated.
Yeah.
So the setup is always, it's got to be fair. It's got to be, accurate. I can hide it as best I can, but it needs to be there so that the reader can say, oh, yes, I should have seen that coming.
Yeah, and even more so if then someone backs up 3 pages and rereads it, it's actually all laid out in front of them. It's just whether or not they recognized it,
right.
Which is another key thing that we try to do.
Very much a murder mystery sort of thing. All the clues have to be there.
Yeah, it's the little Agatha Christie in space.
Yes.
Man, Agatha Christie Chiss space. I'm writing a note about that. We might talk later.
There you go.
So you mentioned it earlier.
I would never say Agatha Christie, but you probably would later
it's
on.
now recorded. It's going to be
Yes.
out there.
Yes.
Oh well. So you mentioned it earlier, and I think it's now a good time to start talking about these, is memories. Which is not the beginning of a Barbra Streisand song, though I think about it the way we were all the time when I say that. The book is filled with all these interstitial memories that take us away from the main story and back to all these key moments in Thrawn.
Yeah.
Thrawn getting adopted, Thrawn meeting certain characters for the first time. So how did you go about mapping out which moments you felt like you were going to need in terms of booking out those memories and saying, well, okay, we definitely need this moment, but maybe not necessarily this moment in Thrawn's life.
Yeah.
Other than, because I should in truth reveal to everyone, other than the one memory that I told you really needed to include, which was Thrawn and Ar'alani having a little sparring fight. I didn't realize you were going to send them on a nice night out at the art museum before that. That was super cool. So other than that one, how did you kind of scaffold what moments you felt you needed and what moments maybe would leave for another time?
Well, as you said, a lot of those are meeting pivotal characters for the first time. The first meeting between Thrawn and Thurfian, Thrawn and General Bakif, various things of that sort. Some of the people who would make an impact on his life and his career. Others that were just, let's show off some of his tactical ability and show some of the people around him, not just these pivotal characters, but others around the edges, and either saying, that was not fair, or ooh, shiny. And just, again, a lot of the fun of writing Thrawn is watching the people around him react to him. And so some tactical things, some things that where he succeeds, but because of politics, he gets hammered for it anyway. His growing interactions with these pivotal characters, and just a lot of, these are the ones you really need. You'll also have noticed, and you will read, I don't think this is a spoiler, but maybe I shouldn't say it. So you'll figure it out when you finish the book. Just the timing of where the memories fit in the timeline.
Oh, yeah. That for those who have not finished the book yet, we won't spoil that. But that is good to note that by the time you get to the book, end of the book, not only will you have a clear sense of where the main story is, but where those memories fit.
Yeah.
Do you have a favorite of the memories in this first book? Is there one that that's my favorite one for any random reason?
I would probably take Thrawn and the sparring, the stick. Somebody was saying, what are the readers looking for? Well, Thrawn goes on a date. Well, yeah, kind of. Hadn't thought of it that way, but sure. And but there are a lot of them, I think, really showcase his abilities militarily and his inability to actually connect with people through the politics or the family, or I've explained this, why don't you understand it type of problem that he tends to have sometimes, especially early on before he started to prove himself.
Which kind of makes his relationship with Ar'alani a little unique in that it seems that we get multiple instances, both from the memories and then what we learn about them in the main story, and going back to things like treason, that it's clear that Thrawn has sort of tried multiple times, and that she does seem to get him in a way that others don't, and that in that way then he gets to be a little more open with her in a way that he isn't with a lot of other characters who it seems like he makes an attempt, they don't get it, and he's like, darn it, moving on.
This is also a difference. A lot of people have brought up the resemblance to Sherlock Holmes. The big difference I see is that, and no, I did not deliberately put that in, but I've read all the Holmes stories, so that kind of wove itself into the original creation of Thrawn. But Holmes would be impatient if someone didn't understand. I remember a wince-worthy moment where he's asked Watson to, tell me what you see here. And Watson has listed a few things, and Holmes says, very good. You missed everything of importance, but at least you're trying, type of thing, kind of scathing. If you are interested in learning, if you're teachable, Thrawn will take the time to teach you. He's done it with Pelion, with Eli, Commodore Farrow, Ar'alani, some of the other characters. And those are the ones he builds the closest relationships with, because even if they don't fully understand him, they understand there's something unique here and they value it. I think that maybe Thrawn probably has decided that's the best he can get. That's what he's going to have to settle for, is people not understanding him, but trusting him and respecting him. Kind of a lonely guy when you think about it.
Yeah, a little bit, but much like other characters who often appear lonely, I think of like characters like Batman, who's like an ultimate loner character, and yet he's constantly recruiting more Robins and Nightwings and Batgirls and stuff. And Thrawn's a little the same way. He would seem this loner, but there's always a Pharaoh or a Eli Vanto or a Pelion or an Ar'alani, or as we will see with maybe some other characters that we meet in this trilogy, there are always people kind of in his orbit that he is finding ways to cling to, even if it's a little.
He may feel isolated, but that's not the actual fact of it. Mm-hmm. He does have these people who are ready to stand up for
him. Just because I'm trying to give our dear readers as many little clues and teases about book 2 as I can. Maybe we'll see the memories return in future books, though. It's important to note that other characters other than Thrawn also have memories, so perhaps they won't appear.
Yeah, it's a nice way to build in some background without having it woven into the main storyline, especially when it's separated by months or years. A good way to have a parallel storyline that is obvious that this is different from the main storyline by calling it memories. We did a little of that with Thrawn Alliances, but the chapters were not specified as this is the Thrawn Vader part, this is the Thrawn Anakin Padme part. And I think that made for a bit more confusion. So calling them memories and having their own typeface and whatever, I think helps a lot with the keeping everything aligned in proper perspective and proper timeline.
Yeah, I definitely.
But yeah, I'm expecting the memories thing to go through all 3 books, though, as you say, not necessarily all the same person.
Which is fun. So something, and I have to be so honest, I didn't realize this myself till we were working on the second book. I just didn't realize it at all. And something readers may notice as they read through this book is the absence of something that is like one of the hallmarks and pillars of Star Wars. There are no droids in the Ascendancy.
Yes,
none.
Correct.
0. No droids. So was that something that as you were writing just sort of evolved? You're like, oh, there are no droids. Okay, that makes sense because XYZ. Was that more of a intentional choice about creating a distinction between the Lesser Galaxy and the Ascendancy? How did that come about?
It was hinted at in Alliances where Thrawn doesn't seem to recognize R2, the droid and such. But I thought, yeah, why not? Let's just do this. There are no droids here. There are no semi-sentient or sentient mechanical constructs to do everything. We have to do all of this ourselves. And then you can backfill the fluxes and radiation, everything would probably make them unstable, etc. But it was just again a contrast. This is, as we don't have turbo lasers and star destroyers to work with, we also don't have droids. We have to do things some other way. And there may be people on the fringes of the intersection between the chaos and the Empire, the lesser space, that will have some knowledge of them, but they've not penetrated really into the chaos itself.
And I mean, not just the lack of droids, this is related to that, they don't use computers for much navigation either.
You can't. The chaos, just everything shifts so quickly. You can't plot out you can't plot out a hyperspace route the way you can in the Empire. It just, everything's too crowded. There are too many large masses in motion. There are too many angled flux and electromagnetic flux things. You have to either hire a navigator who on some level is using the Force, so they don't all call it the Force, or you simply go jump by jump, where you go a couple systems at a time, recheck and go on again. This is part of this is came up with discussions with Story Group, and we were wondering, if the Republic was around for thousands of years, why are these areas still unknown? And we came up with, it's because it's really hard to get into and generally not worth the effort. And then backtracked into the physics and everything of how that all worked. And then part of that, if we don't have really any trade with the lesser galaxy, we're not going to get droids, whether they're really functional or not. So again, an entirely different situation, different background that we all have to work with in these books rather than standard Star Wars.
Which just serves to kind of make the chaos and the ascendancy. By the way, the chaos is an amazing name. It's a great name for this place. It's so apt. It just makes it feel both part of Star Wars, but also separate from the galaxy we know. Yeah. And also then just puts more emphasis on the Chiss and their use of these Skywalker navigators and this critical importance. And as we see from the excerpt the early excerpt where Valius is meeting Thrawn for the first time, we get a little bit of this, that even within the Ascendancy, the existence and the knowledge of the Skywalkers, even within the Ascendancy itself, is a very closely guarded and protected secret and bit of information. What are the ramifications if the existence and if the relative existence of the Skywalker program, for lack of a better word, became wider knowledge, not just within the Ascendancy, but perhaps outside there?
Well, like they are a military asset. They are what the military and diplomats use for faster travel outside the Ascendancy. Ascendancy is fairly calm area. You can do that without navigators or Skywalkers. So they are a military asset. As with every military asset, if the enemy finds out about it, or potential enemies, they can either destroy it or take it away from you. And the Chiss have no interest in losing their Skywalkers either way. So the danger is, it may be overblown, it may not be, the fear, but they don't want anybody knowing about this, because these Skywalkers are fairly vulnerable, being young, and they're also, if we lose that asset, we cripple our ability to go out and find threats before they get close enough to start hitting us. So there's a certain degree of paranoia in the Chiss culture, probably not unwarranted. They've had a lot of history to go by, and their paranoia probably comes honestly.
Speaking of paranoia, something that can kind of play into that sometimes is, we saw certainly from Eli Vento's experiences and his what he told of Thrawn, that there are a lot of myths and stories about the Chiss.
Yes.
That, Eli was aware of some. We find, and we will find, that there are many cultures that within the chaos that have myths and stories about the Chiss. Does the opposite also hold true? Do the Chiss have myths and stories about other civilizations, or are they like, no, we really just care about ourselves?
They probably have some. They've got some historical artifacts and such you'll see mention of in the book, especially when Thrawn's doing the art museum thing. But mostly their interest in other cultures is largely, are they going to be someone we can deal with? Are they going to be someone who might be a threat someday? If not either of those, we're probably not going to really care that much about them. They are fairly ingrown, their culture. They have a nice wide field in among all of the thickets around them, and yeah, we're comfortable here. There's a lot of the Chiss political structure that we don't need to go out there. Nothing out there but trouble, and let's just stay here. If someone comes by and takes a swipe at us, we'll stomp them. Otherwise, we're just happy just being Chiss and being the best thing around.
That sounds pretty reasonable. So just as a little bit of programming note, I think what we're going to do is I have just a couple more questions that I want to make sure we get to, and then what we'll do is we'll do some quick hits of questions, more questions from the Q&A, and some other small questions before we end. But that way, people can tell where we're going with this. This is a question that I get asked constantly, and I I don't know the answer to it, which actually I like that I don't know the answer to this. And I saw some people have submitted it. People submitted it before the thing, which is before the event, which is, what does a happy ending for Thrawn look like? What does Thrawn want? What is, what does he want for himself? What does he want for the Ascendancy? What does happiness for Thrawn look like in the end? Maybe not just in the context of these stories, but like overall, what does Thrawn's happy ending look like?
Probably peace and safety for his people. I don't know if he envisions anything personally or expects any personal happiness. He has a job to do. He's good at this job. And I think his goal is to see it through, make his people safe, whether they appreciate him or not, because he's probably decided somewhere along the line, there are some who appreciate me, most won't. And he's good with that if he can get what he wants, which is protection, defense, happiness for the others.
That's very, very noble of him.
Not like Frodo Baggins at all, it just occurred to me, but
No, not really. So next year, I don't know if you know this, Tim. Next year, Thrawn turns 30. 2021
yes.
is the 30th anniversary of Heir to the Empire, and thus the 30th anniversary of the debut of Thrawn, debut of the character. Your time writing Star Wars. You've said often, we've talked about this. You've said it on panels that the Thrawn you're writing now is the same character that you've always been writing, and regardless of era or time period. While the character has always remained the same and the character on the page has evolved in line with how the character has always been, how has your relationship to Thrawn changed since 1991?
Well, he's still a good friend. I understand him. We hang out a lot together these days. I think it comes down to a matter of understanding. I do understand him. I respect him. I always want to make him shine in the areas where he should shine and perhaps falter in the areas that I know he's not good at. I want to make him a reasonable balance between competence and blind spots. We all have them, and that's what makes for a realistic character. He's going to be with me for at least another couple of years. Hopefully we'll be able to do more books later on. I don't anticipate future, because future always in motion, the future is. Yoda said that. Just later that same afternoon, by the way, Yoda said, once you start down the Star Wars path, forever will it dominate your destiny. So 30 years is, we were not expecting this. I don't think anybody was expecting the Thrawn trilogy to take off. I don't think they didn't know if Star Wars fans were still out there. 30 years later, Star Wars is still going strong. I'm still happy to be part of it, overjoyed to be part of it. This is a lot of fun working with these stories. So my relationship with Thrawn is, we're friends. I'm the guy who kind of points the spotlight at him and lets him be the best he can be. And I'm happy to be able to do that.
That's good to hear. I'm happy that you're still doing it, because I was way too young to be your editor then. So I'm glad that you stuck around so I could.
I do go through editors quite a bit, over the 30 years, but that's kind of the way it works.
Yeah, 30 years is a long time to be writing kind of the same thing, or at least within a similar bounds. But it's also impressive, and so next year we get to celebrate the 30th anniversary with obviously the second book here, and so lots of fun to be had. Okay, I think now we're going to switch into a couple more questions, mainly ones that have come from our Q&A and ones that were collected before the event. To everyone who submitted a Q&A question, first of all, thank you. Whether you submitted before the event, right now, you submitted on Twitter, you submitted here. Lots of people submitted the same question, so apologies if we don't credit the exact same people for every question. And I will note.
And if you don't get your question answered, hopefully next year we'll be able to do conventions again. You can ask me some of those then.
Or your questions may also be answered in a future book. Because some of the questions that we did get are questions very specific about, like, is this reference going to pop up again? Is this a reference to this thing? And really the answer to all those questions is it very well could be. So join us on the future stories, and maybe. Yeah. One of the questions, I mean, I could do a control search for questions about Eli Vanto, and I think all of them would be about Eli Vanto, or most of them would be. So I'm going to coalesce all the Eli Vanto questions into this. We get asked constantly, are we ever going to see Eli again? We got asked that after the first Thrawn, after Thrawn Alliances, and we obviously saw him again in Treason. The answer is, of course, we absolutely could, especially if you read Treason and you know where he's gone and where he is. And there's no reason we couldn't see Eli again. So the question that I'm going to ask you is, much like you probably didn't imagine the reception that Thrawn and Heir of the Empire and those stories were going to get, when you were first creating Eli, did you have any idea that people were going to cling to him with the level of sort of adoration and joy that people do?
I never know what is going to click with the readers. There's no way any of us know that. I mean, my job is to do the best characterization, the best story I can, and then it's up to the readers. Eli was crafted to be someone that people could relate to, of, I don't like the situation I'm in, and slowly growing to realize, first, this is good, and then finally, this is better than anything I had planned for myself. I've had that. I mean, I never expected my career to do as well as it did, thanks to Star Wars. And I think a lot of people can look back at their lives and, if I hadn't met that person, or I hadn't, made that decision, my life would be so different. And I'm kind of glad I did that. So Eli was always a person that could resonate with the readers. And I'm just very glad that he did. And yes, I would love to see more of him if I ever get a shot at a timeline where he's alive. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, I don't think, it's not a spoiler to say, I don't think a reader should expect Eli to be showing up in books 2 or 3. Of this
no, the timeline isn't correct for that.
This one made me chuckle a lot. Is Thrawn a good artist himself? In addition to kind of cultivating his appreciation of art, would that have been something he would have ever actually formally studied in trying to do? Or is it just something that he has learned to appreciate because of the tactical nature of the study?
It's not something I've addressed. It's not an answer I've really come up with. My tendency is to think no, that he's not an artist, but he sees things in the art that other people don't. I was a middling musician, never anything great at it. I played the cello and the piano, much younger, but I appreciate music. So you don't have to be an artist to understand and see the art. You don't have to be a musician to recognize the crafting of the music you like. So he might have done something, but I don't think so.
Okay. I guess that's why he and Ar'alani didn't go to like a paint class together. They just went to the art.
Yes.
That makes sense. So many eagle-eyed readers have noticed this and like to remind us about it all the time, which is that Thrawn has this kind of fondness for using a particular word, at least in the last few of your books, the word perhaps.
Yes.
Is that at all intentional? If it is, what is it about that word that seems to have, that seems to work so well for Thrawn?
Authors all have their favorite words. I will go through a manuscript I've done and check off certain words I know I have a tendency to overuse and try to change those. I will start looking for perhaps from now on. But perhaps is, what it means is, to me, is I'm not saying you're right, I'm not saying you're wrong. It may need more thought, it may need more data. I'm not putting you down. But I'm not going to agree with you yet either. And is a bit more, perhaps, cultured a word than maybe, which means the same thing. I'm not going to make a decision on what you said or make an evaluation right now. but we'll don't abandon this line of thought, this line of reasoning, whatever. So it's something that Thrawn would say a lot, because it also encourages people to keep thinking, run along this track for a bit, see if it takes you someplace. If not, back up and try something else. It's encouraging without committing you one way or the other.
And just for everyone's reference, there are actually only 82 appearances of the word perhaps in Chaos Rising, and most of them are not attributable to Thrawn in dialogue or otherwise. Most of them just appear as words and sentences or other people's style.
It's probably a Chiss thing. It's probably part of the translation from the to English that just translates that way.
That makes sense. Somebody asked, and I will answer this question because it's easy for me to answer. Someone asked, where did the idea of putting the Dramatis persona back in the front of the book come from? It came from me, mostly because it is just full of all the information that I kept jotting down as we were working on the book that I was trying to remember. Like, how do I spell this person's name? And, when I, getting the balance between someone's core name versus their Chiss name, and was writing all these things down. And I was like, why don't we just put this in the front of the book? The Dramatis persona obviously is a legacy thing in Star Wars books that people have always enjoyed in it. So it made perfect sense to bring it back, particularly as a way to give people who maybe are not as familiar with Chiss names and terms and the elements of the Chiss that have existed for all these years, a way to kind of give them that anchor at the beginning of the book that, don't worry, like, you're not going to be left behind. You refer to this. So that's what
it's also the flag. These people are going to be important. So watch for them as they come by.
Yes, and I'll tell you that for book 2, we will have a Dramatis persona, and I already made a request to Tim for some information, because we are going to add some stuff to the front Dramatis persona, because I was like, oh, this is important enough. I need my cheat sheet for this. So if I need it as an editorial cheat sheet, you will get it as a reader cheat sheet.
That sounds fair.
Where that comes from. Lost my next question for a second. So you've had a chance with Thrawn to, and particularly in these last few books, and you've had a chance to put Thrawn in the room with characters who, going back to 91, you didn't actually get a chance to do as much. We got to play around with him and Vader, and spend a lot more time with the Emperor, and he got to even meet Director Krennic and spend time with Tarkin. Let's like world between worlds it for a second. If you could just plop Thrawn down next to like a legacy Star Wars character and develop a story that they haven't, a character that he hasn't been able to be around, or perhaps because of the way the timelines work would never have been around, is there a character like, oh, I'd love to see a Thrawn story with Thrawn in that character?
Well, with no ulterior motives whatsoever, I would love to see Thrawn with Ezra Bridger.
Sure, none at all.
Because I want to write those stories, or at least see Dave Filoni's version of those stories. I want to see what happens with that. Aside from Ezra, you'd have a similar dynamic if you dropped him in with Obi-Wan Kenobi. They would be natural antagonists in the Imperial era. Thrawn, obviously a Grand Admiral, Obi-Wan being a Jedi and not a big fan of the Empire. But you could get a very interesting situation if you had something that Thrawn could say, we need to work together on this because it's going to be bad for everybody. And persuading Obi-Wan to join him in a quest, basically the same thing I would hope to do with Ezra if I got a chance to do that story. But failing that, maybe something with Obi-Wan where we have to work together even though we don't necessarily like and certainly don't trust each other. So there would be an interesting cop buddy movie, not quite even that close, but you'd have lots of interesting philosophical discussions of what is the proper role of government, what is the proper role of how much control over the populace is too much, where does freedom come into all this? What you said earlier about individuality, how does that factor into the Empire? You could do a whole lot of things of that sort while having them both kicking butt. which would be a lot of fun to do. So we'll put this into the hopper in case Dave isn't quite ready to do anything with Ezra and Thrawn yet.
Break glass.
Making notes as we speak here.
Case of Obi-Wan. I'll fix that later, but that's what I'm writing. Break glass in case of Obi-Wan. We'll make that work. So I'm going to hit you with a couple of very because we're getting to the end of our time here as we are getting in past the 9 o'clock hour here on the East Coast. So we're going to get to a couple of very quick hit questions, maybe some smaller questions that you can answer in just a word or two, and then we'll wrap things up. First of all, because I think the chat and the Q&A might break if I don't ask this, and I'm sorry that we're not actually going to answer the question, but this will work as happy. Are we going to find out what those extra 3 letters at the end of Thrawn's name mean? The O-D-O.
Oh, the people have caught that. Good,
Yeah.
good. I was wondering if people would catch it. Of course you would.
Are we going to find out why, when, who, what?
Absolutely.
There you go. You will find
assuming Lucasfilm approves that outline. No, I know what happened. The question will be whether I get, and that's approved.
Yes.
Always the question. Lucasfilm has been very good about letting me run off the leash a lot, though. So I'm not expecting any trouble, and if there is, I'm expecting it to be minor and easily tweakable. But yeah, I have that scene in mind, or that whole sequence in mind as to where those letters come from.
That's good. And I will tell everyone the story that when you sent in the manuscript and you were sending in one of the early drafts and his name was spelled different, I was like, this is a typo? And I was like, this doesn't seem like a typo. I'm pretty sure Tim knows how to spell Thrawn's name. Yeah. And I was like, this is a typo? You're like, well, no. What if it isn't a typo? And then you cryptically said there's a cool reason. And I was like, that's good enough for me. So yeah, before this trilogy is done, we will probably find out what that means.
By the way, I didn't have that cool reason at the time I told you I did, but I knew there are all sorts of possibilities. We'll find something very cool.
So yeah, as Tim was talking about earlier, editors and authors, one of the things we love more than anything is we love story possibilities. So if somebody leaves a story thread, whether or not we get to that thread, the fact that it's there is great. But yes, we will get to this one. We will figure out more about the ODO. As we talked about, we will learn more about the families. Are we going to learn a bit more about? Are we going to learn more about why are we going to learn more about Bakif and sort of where he comes from?
I think we will. Yes, we're going to learn a little more about Bakif, some of his backstory. Remember, we did talk about memories going through the other 2 books. There are all sorts of interesting people, places, and things to be added into that, form the backdrop for the main storyline that's in progress. So yeah, Bakif is somebody I want to study a little bit more of, and I think again, barring any complaints or problems from Lucasfilm or Tom and his fellow minions and merry band of pirates over there at Del Rey, we will get some of his backstory, certainly where it interacts with Thrawn's.
And so I have to ask this next question a little delicately, because asking it directly would actually be a little bit spoilery for some small but cool things in the first book. So some eagle-eyed readers who have already read into the book have noticed some fun little references and connections maybe to some of your other Thrawn stories and some of your other Star Wars books overall.
Yes.
Do we think that some of those connections and some of those references might at least maybe continue into this?
My goal is to make the canon books and my Legends books as much a coherent whole as I can. Certain things have been preempted by the ending of Rebels and some of the stuff in Rebels, the various positions where Thrawn gets different ranks. Some of that has been altered, but for the most part, the books and stories do connect and don't step on each other too much. By the way, t-shirt idea, Thrawn is not a legend, he's a myth. So take it with that as you choose. But yeah, I'm trying. But yes, I'm trying to keep everything not running over itself. So yeah, that is deliberate, and I hope to continue that as the series goes on.
Awesome. All right. Well, this is going to be the last question, which is really not a question, but a statement, which is people who either have already finished book one, or people who are in the midst of it, or people who have come to this event and are picking it up after this event are going to start right after this. What, you know, in a couple sentences or less, what would you say people should be most excited about for the next two installments in the trilogy as we make our way further into the Ascendancy?
We've set up some plot threads. We've got some potential enemies lurking in the woodwork. We're going to start developing those. Some people there that the Pakash, who have a particular emblem that you will recognize, or at least one clan of them does. They are not very important or not very prominent in book one. They'll be picking up some more of book two and book three. Again, being given 3 books allows me to set up all of these little things. Okay, this character shows up here, maybe won't really show up for a while, and then come back in with a vengeance. So I'm intertwining a whole bunch of these characters, these plot threads. That's what hopefully you'll look forward to. You'll look forward to building this story to a hopefully satisfying conclusion, watching the characters grow and change, rise, fall, whatever, as the story progresses. So this is hopefully going to be a saga that you will enjoy the ride all the way through to the end.
That sounds good. And yeah, I will tell everyone that as we're working on book 2 right now, we are working on book 2 with the outline for book 3 in hand, so that we know that we are, you know, continuing to seed things for book 3 into book 2. And if something happens in book 2 that doesn't match up with what we had planned, to make the adjustments so that this all sort of flows. So we're going to wrap up here in a second. Just want to thank everyone. Obviously, Tim, thank you for hanging out with me this evening. For everyone who didn't get it, you know, if your question didn't get quite answered, like I said, stay tuned. There's lots more Thrawn story coming. Maybe we'll get to it. But if you have other questions about this that you want to shoot at us, you can always contact the Del Rey Star Wars team on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram. You can send us questions. We answer some. Some of them we will leave for the book to answer for themselves. But I want to thank everyone for spending Friday with us. This was so much fun. It was such a great time. There's lots of cool things coming. I wish I could tell you all about them, but I'm going to wait until they're really real and we can hold them up in front of you and say, hey, you know what, why don't you just take this? But thank you all very much. And Tim, thank you again.
Thank you all for coming. I prefer seeing you all in person, but if this is the best we can do right now, we'll do conventions and appearances and signings in the future, I have no doubt. So hang in there, everybody. Be safe. And hope you enjoy this book and the rest of them to come.
Thank you so much, Timothy and Tom, for joining us this evening. This has been such a fantastic event. I think the participants have set a record for us in activity, both in the chat and also in the Q&A. There's 120 questions in the Q&A, which is bananas. So,
and as I was telling you earlier, this is the first signing I've ever been to where there wasn't a single empty seat or appearance. Yes. I hope you all had nice, comfortable seats of your own.
Yes, and I can see too from the chat that there were people all over the world logged in tonight too. So thank you very much to everyone who logged in. We hope we can see you again or have you log on for a virtual event with us again. Thank you very much to Timothy and Tom. And you can purchase a copy of Chaos Rising at powells.com. Have a good night.
Thank you, and may the Chiss be with you.
Good night, everyone. Enjoy the blue pages.
Good night.
Good night.